In 1947, a line was drawn on a map, and just like that, it shattered a subcontinent. Today, we're talking about the Great Rupture, the Partition of India. It was one of the most violent and disruptive events of the 20th century, and believe me, its aftershocks are still shaping our world today.
To really wrap your head around the partition, you've got to start with the sheer scale of it. 14 million. That's how many people were torn from their homes, forced to run with whatever they could grab, suddenly finding themselves refugees in the very land their ancestors had lived on for centuries.
And then there's this number. This is the high-end estimate for the number of people who were killed. Up to 2 million men, women, and children lost their lives in the violence that erupted. The human cost, it's just staggering.
So, what exactly was this cataclysmic event? It's known as the Great Rupture, a moment in history that created new nations, yeah, but it was born from just an unimaginable amount of suffering.
Okay, so here's what happened. As British rule ended in August 1947, the decision was made to split the subcontinent. The new borders were drawn mostly along religious lines, creating a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan. For millions of people, this literally meant they went to sleep one night and woke up the next morning on the wrong side of a brand new and very hastily drawn border.
This division kicked off a massive two-way migration. You had Muslims in the new India heading towards Pakistan and Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan making the journey towards India. And in the middle of all this unprecedented chaos, sectarian mobs took advantage, leading to horrific, widespread violence, looting, and murder.
But you know, numbers and maps, they don't even begin to tell the real story. For the people who were actually caught in the middle of this, these migrations were journeys of absolute terror.
This quote, it just gets right to the horror of it all. They had these refugee trains, right? They were supposed to carry people to safety, but so often they became rolling tombs. These ghost trains would pull into a station in total silence, their cars filled not with hopeful survivors, but with the bodies of those who had been murdered along the way.
And these journeys were seen through so many different eyes. You had outsiders, like the photographer Margaret Bourke-White, who captured these grim images of trains surrounded by vultures. You had innocent victims, like a little 4-year-old boy named Manzoor, who died of starvation and was buried right beside the train tracks. And then you had the survivors, people like Shane Ali, who saw his family murdered, and Tikam Chand, who witnessed things no one should ever have to see on his own desperate escape.
And yet, even in the middle of all that darkness, there were these incredible stories of survival. Stories that show you just how resilient the human spirit can be.
So let's start with Tikam Chand. He was a merchant, and he just knew that his family was in grave danger. He had to do something decisive, to get them to safety in a town called Firozapur.
His plan, well, it was both desperate and kind of brilliant. First, they actually took a train in the wrong direction, backward, to a station called Kanawel. Why? Because from there, they could catch an express mail train they were hoping would be safer. As mobs swarmed their car looking for Sikhs, he and his entire family crammed into a tiny bathroom, just praying they wouldn't be discovered.
In the end, what saved them was an act of unbelievable bravery from a total stranger. A Muslim station master literally risked his own life to protect their train car from the mobs. It was just this incredible moment of humanity shining through all the hate.
Now for another story, this one about a young boy. His entire world was destroyed in an instant, but somehow he found a way to keep going.
Can you imagine being 8 years old and watching a mob murder your entire family right in front of you? That was Shane Ali's reality. But in her final moments, his mother's quick thinking saved his life. She disguised him in a girl's dupatta, a kind of scarf, and because of that, he survived. He would spend the rest of his childhood in refugee camps.
So how do you ever recover from a trauma like that? For Shane, it was years later when a friend gave him this simple but profound piece of advice. Forgive and be cured. That phrase became his guide. It helped him process that immense loss and really transform himself from a victim of history into a true survivor.
You see, the partition wasn't just a collection of individual stories and tragedies. It was a trauma that left a deep, permanent scar on the two nations it created.
Both nations were born into pure chaos. Pakistan had to somehow take in 7 million refugees while not even having the most basic things to run a government, like office chairs and tables. At the exact same time, India was dealing with its own side of the migration crisis and facing the enormous task of trying to unite over 500 different princely states into one country.
The thing is, the violence of 1947 wasn't just some historical event that's over and done with. It was a foundational wound.
It left a deep psychological scar on both India and Pakistan that has never really healed. It continues to influence their domestic politics, and it absolutely shapes the often very tense relationship between them to this very day.
And that really brings us to the end here. And it leaves us with a really tough question. The partition wasn't just about redrawing maps. It was about tearing the very fabric of humanity. And it forces all of us to ask, how does a wound that deep ever truly heal?